What are the actual steps to creating a six-figure freelance mindset? That's what we're going over today. And the important thing to remember here is that mindset is one of the most critical parts of getting to six figures. You have to get over all of your internal hurdles. You kind of have to deal with all of these weird, complicated things that pop up that may be from when you were a kid, or like if you ever got bullied, or you had, difficult relationships, or you had really low self-esteem, or you were dealing with a lot of self-doubt or imposter syndrome. Like, that's what we're going over. So this was a question that was asked in my Freelance Writer Wealth Lab course. So one of my students, we have one of the bonuses of the course is that I gathered up my, hey Vicky, welcome in. I gathered up some of my six-figure freelance friends and I asked them, like, tell me what's going on. How did you get to six figures? And it's like this 1 hour call that we have as a bonus for the course. And so one of my students listened to that call and she was like, I have questions. Let's talk about it. So I was like, hey man, can we actually do this on the live stream? I think there's kind of a version of this that I want to do on the live stream. So now we're doing it on a live stream. Hey Marie, welcome in. Yeah, there's no, the cone of silence is downstairs, but we do have Charlotte's here today. Charlotte's hiding. There she is. We have Charlie today. Well, let's see if we can get this correct. She's down there hiding. So we just have one of them today. Hey, Cheryl, welcome in. The pup date on Charlotte, before we get started, I'm going to give a pup date. I know, Minnie, you're just like, I should get something. Hey, Brianna. Ooh, yay. I'm glad that you're excited for this. I'm going to pop that up. So Brianna says, hi, excited for this one. Yay. I'm excited for you to be here. Yeah. So Marie says the six-figure class was awesome. So Marie is one of my students. She's one of the ones who has access to that. So if you sign up for Freelance Writer Wealth Lab, which is going to be open in like 30 days. So if you go to, hold on a second. If you go to mandyellis.com/course, then you can join the wait list for the course that opens in like just about 30 days. You can also get my free pricing guide. So if you go to, if you sign up for the course wait list, you'll get it. But if you want to not sign up for the course wait list, you can go to mandyellis.com/pricing guide to get it. Yeah, Charlotte is in mermaid mode. So here's the pup date on Charlotte. So Charlotte still smells skunky. She has had 5 baths with all of the stuff, like everything that you can imagine about skunk stuff, she's had it. So basically her whole face and her chest, like I'll see if I can get her to sit up. So her whole face, there she is, and her chest smell like skunk. Like it's just, she must have gotten sprayed from 3 millimeters away from her face. Good girl. So like, I can't really touch her. Like it's still skunky. It's not super terrible anymore, but like it's rough time. So she's not smelling up the room, but like this blanket, after it's touched her and she's rolled around it, it will smell like skunk. So we're doing everything we can. The house, we think, is pretty much skunk free except for a few like little weird areas. But yeah, we're still skunky. We're working on it. We've tried everything. It's just really embedded like in her skin, right? So the skunk is oily and she, your skin is oily, right? So it just bonds basically. I think a lot of times when people get sprayed by a skunk or dogs, like they get it on their skin and people think it's on their fur. It is definitely on her skin. So like if she goes outside and gets all oily and whatever, she smells. All right. Good girl, Charlotte. You're doing great today. You look great. You look beautiful. Also, she'll notice that she's wearing a blue collar. That's Bo's old collar because her collar, we just could not get the smell out of it. So we had to throw it away. We bought her a new one, but we don't want her to smell up the new one. So she's wearing Bo's old collar. Everyone will get new collars because the skunk smell just like infiltrates. I've washed that collar 3 times to get her original skunk smell out of it. Yeah, I know. I'm telling everybody your personal business. You're like looking at me like, how dare you? And I know, because that's why you're here to get Fritos. Yeah, good job, Bean. You're doing great. All right, let's get to the topic. So Brianna's excited. Marie says that she listened to the six-figure class 3 times. Yeah, that's one of the things that I think makes it a great bonus for the course is like that 6-figure call. Sorry, that 6-figure call. It talks about a lot of different things. That's why we're going over it today. And that's why I thought it would make a really, really fantastic live stream. So let's hop in. Let's just get rolling. And we have a question today that we're going to get to at the end. All right, question. No, not question. Part number 1. All right, let's go through this. I have notes. Okay, so here's the deal. When my student asked me this, it was Jennifer. Jennifer's not here right now, but Jennifer asked me this question. She's like, what did you actually take away from it, right? What are some insights or mindset steps to consider, right? So one of the things that I think is really important to consider when you're thinking about mindset is like, it's not really about the money. That's the thing that people miss, is like, they think that there's a magic thing about hitting 6 figures or pricing their thing to like magically get there. And that's just not it. It's really about being strategic with how you view yourself and your value to your clients. And then also how you translate that into pricing and what gigs you take and what gigs you let go of and how you pay attention to that over time. So for example, the important thing was like over time, you realize how much money you've left on the table and you're like, oh shit, that was a big mistake. But then what you kind of figure out is you're like, oh, okay, so this is how I need to price my services. But I also need to get over the hump of like my limiting beliefs that like I can't make 6 figures, or that freelance writers don't make six figures, or imposter syndrome that you're not a good enough writer to make 6 figures. That was one of mine. Or that you'll be doing this forever. Like you'll be toiling away at a certain income level forever, and you just won't. If you're really smart about what you take and what you don't, that's like, that's a really big thing. The other piece here with mindset is like, you have to keep the marketing going. Like, I don't care at what level you do it at. If you do 1 LOI a week or you do 5 LOIs a month, or even when you're busy, you have to keep the marketing going. So this was something that I think a lot of people miss when they switch, like kind of move over to a better 6-figure mindset, is like, you are continually marketing. And this was something that Jennifer was kind of struggling with, and I've talked to her about it a little bit in our class, is like, when you're really busy, that's the time you need to be marketing. Because then when you're really busy, you get to be very choosy. And that really helps, like, your perception of like how well you're doing, but also like your mindset. You don't have to be so scarcity based or fear based or be like, oh my gosh, I have to take the work or else. You have so much work that you can't take anything else. So if you're marketing, that means that whoever comes there, you can be like, I don't really want this right now, or yeah, or you can schedule projects out further. This is really important. This is something I deal with freelance writers with their mindset all the time. They think that marketing is only when they need work. No, people get to 6 figures by understanding that marketing has to happen all the time. I don't care if it's 5 LOIs a month and you set down like 1 Saturday to get it done. It'll take you an hour. That's something else we do in the course, is like, I have a lot of templates that I give everybody so they get the marketing done faster. So, for example, I think it took me like an hour to send 25 LOIs. Like, they're all templatized. I have a list. I have a whole process. It might have taken 2 hours, but it takes essentially no time now, because we all have processes in the systems. And I understood that like 6-figure freelancers aren't reinventing the wheel. They're not marketing in these like super lengthy, trying ways. They are marketing in ways that are templatized, systematized, processes. They have processes, and they're not fuddy-duddying around. They're understanding that they need to use all of their creative juice for their projects, so they get better projects, better clients, so they get better results, better testimonials, right? All the other business stuff needs to be as automated as possible and as low key as possible. So in order to keep the marketing machine running, it has to be going all the time. So my phases, let's talk about this. My mindset originally was like, I hate marketing. I have to sell to everybody. This is terrible. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's not how you get to 6 figures. The switch to getting to 6 figures, okay, write this down. This is really important. The switch to getting to 6 figures is that you are marketing for like tomorrow's client. You're not marketing for today's client. You're marketing now because you are trying to help people with your valuable services so their business or their product or service or their audience can get a better result or can get more help. That's the whole point. You're not marketing because you're like, I need the money, please help, which sometimes you're just, that's, your fear-based mindset will creep in, right? But 6-figure freelancers are marketing because they understand the value and the help that they provide. They're going out there because they're like, I love my business and I want to help more people, right? And they're going out there because they really enjoy it. Like when I get a content strategy project, I'm just like, yes, like I love that work. I love how much it impacts my clients. I love how much it helps them. I love how it takes them from like basically not understanding content or strategy or how to, you know, help their audience, to like having a direct plan that actually does things. It gets KPI, you know, it meets all the KPIs, it gets results, all that good stuff. So six-figure freelancers understand the value, right? They understand the long-term value. Is that a buzzword for you now? Long-term value? I mean, it's not bad. If that's a buzzword for you, like, I don't know. You kind of are my dog. If long-term value is one of your buzzwords that makes you get up. Here you go. Good job, Minnie. You're doing great. You're a superstar. All right, so they understand that their content lives on. They understand that people use a content strategy deck and the content strategy packages and the deliverables and the messaging and positioning deliverables for like years. Okay, so if someone pays you $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 or even $5,000, that stuff lives for years. It brings traffic and clients, and it allows them to have at least something to work from, right? So let's say they revise your content strategy after a year. That's totally fine. At least they now have something to work from. And basically, like, that's what, like $2,000, $2,500 a month-ish for content strategy to have the right content in place. I mean, they say that's pretty affordable. But the deal is that six-figure freelancers understand that long-term value. So they're marketing with the confidence of knowing that they're going to help their clients succeed, right? They're not marketing as they're like thinking about themselves. They're thinking about their clients. Actually, most of the time, I think about my client's audience. So most of the time when I'm marketing, like in my six-figure business, I think about like, how am I going to help these people get the product they need, right? I reach out to specific startups. Like I'm usually in the Series B, C, sometimes Series A kind of landscape for startups. And I find that I think about like, this product is amazing. This startup, like this thing that you created out of nothing, this is amazing and it's going to help your audience do ABC. Like we need to let more people know about that. And the way to do that is content. So that's my mindset when I'm going into marketing. I'm not like thinking about if I'm overly salesy or if I'm being annoying or frustrating or whatever. The other thing is that I understand how my marketing has shifted, but I always do it. So here's the difference. Like my marketing was like, I recommend, people always ask me for a number, right? So I say 50 to 75 LOIs or pitches a month, right? But for me, that was very hard to like deal with. I like an effort goal. Like even if I hit 50 to 75 LOIs, like if I hit 74 and not 75, I didn't feel good about myself. So what I did was I did marketing for an hour every day, Monday through Friday. Monday through Friday, an hour of marketing. Now, marketing could be sending LOIs or pitches. It could be making my list, finding new potential clients, liking and commenting on potential clients' posts. It could be connecting on LinkedIn and growing my network. It could be a whole bunch of things, following up. But that's all important. So when I first started, I did that effort goal an hour every day, Monday through Friday. I usually hit somewhere between 50 and 75 LOIs a month. I never have hit 100. And then as I've gone on, I switched to like doing it monthly. Like I would do, 25 LOIs, 50 LOIs a month. I would just do it on a day. And then now I do it quarterly. But new thing is, as a six-figure freelance writer and as like someone watching this video who wants to make six figures or you want to grow more figures in your business, the deal is sometimes you have to get scrappy. And I think now where it's like summer and it's slow, which it's always a battle. There's always like certain months of the year. And for me, it's like summer, like July, August sometimes can be very slow. And then spring break time, like February through April sometimes can be slow. But it's like sometimes you got to be scrappy. So for me, I'm doing more marketing right now because things just are very slow. Everyone's taking forever to get back to me, or the processes have been very slow. Not everyone, but a majority. And then the other thing is like things are changing again, right? The economy's changing again. People are kind of like worried about things. So that for me, I'm getting scrappy. I'm doing more marketing because I want to make sure there's work in the pipeline. So you have to kind of have this idea that like, even if you make six figures, there's not like some magic place that you get to where like you get to stop marketing. And there's not some magic place that you get to. I hear you grumbling. There's not some magic place that you get to where you're like too good for that. Like you got to get scrappy sometimes. Like I know lots of people who continually hit six figures where they get scrappy. They reach out to their friends and say like, hey, is there any extra work you know of? Or they do more marketing, or they go back to a client that they kind of lost in the fray and they see if they have any work or they want to work with them. All these things are really important to kind of getting that mindset in place. Yes? Would you like to make a comment? I hear you over there making noise. You look like a tiny dinosaur. Oh my gosh. Can you do your high five for everybody? High five. High five. Good job. The good thing is the skunk smell is not so much on her paws. It's like basically on her chest and face. So if I touch her paws, I'm usually okay. Good job. All right, one more. High five. High five. Good job. All right, you can have this one for free. Good job. All right. So that's like our first piece that I wanted to talk about is kind of the mindset shifts and the important things about marketing, and keeping kind of all of your stuff in a line. So like the other thing that we kind of want to think about in this realm is that there are six-figure freelance writers, myself included, and like several of my friends, and this still is a mindset thing where we still struggle with money mindset. Like how much money you make. Oh no, I touched your skunky face. No, now my hand's gonna smell like skunk. Ugh, it's okay. I still love you. We still struggle with money mindset. So one of my friends, and she talks about this in the call, in Freelance Writer Wealth Lab, about how she's like, she hit 300K and she's still scarcity. Like she's still very worried there won't be more money or that there won't be more clients. And I still do that too. Like even after all the things I've done or all the mindset work I've done, I still struggle with that where I'm like, oh my God, everything's crashing, right? And that's an old belief. It's an old mindset that I have to get rid of. But by hitting six figures, you don't just like magically erase all of the old beliefs that you have. It's kind of like it follows you around. Like I always kind of imagine it like a little filing cabinet. It's like tied to you, right? Like, so you have this little filing cabinet, that like just, it's tied to you and you just kind of like walk around with it, dragging behind you. And when you hit a certain number, it doesn't change. Like it feels different than what you think. Every time I think this kind of happens, like when people hit six figures or they hit five figures or they end up hitting, 8 or 9 figures, whatever. There's always something that follows you along where you're like, I thought that would be gone by now. And you have to work on your money mindset, like scarcity and fear, and there won't be more work or clients. There's always more work and clients. Like that's something else is that, I was telling my students is that there have been freelance writers who have survived all of the bad times like on the planet. Since freelance writing has been a thing, freelance writers have survived. They have continued to get work. Some people I know have done their best years during recession times, like really bad recession times. They ended up having their best years because as those things go, right? Sometimes people forget this is like some industries are totally decimated and some bolster up, right? So like with COVID, everything kind of changed, right? With all of that stuff that happened, there were some industries, right, like where there was just tons of money being pumped into them, and some industries where everything just completely shut off and parts of it atrophied, right? So like those kinds of things really change how your business goes, right? This is one of the reasons why I recommend having different niches. But your mindset is the thing that kind of changes that, is you're like, all right, how do I pivot? How do I make this work? How do I kind of figure this puzzle out? And that's why this is the same thing. I know I've said this like a bunch, but this is what I tell my students, like, understand what's going on, learn and adapt, solve the puzzle in front of you. Like that's what you have to do. Running this type of business is always about solving the puzzle in front of you. It's not about magically creating some sort of like dragon type thing where the dragon's like, you get all the wishes, or like a genie. It's sort of this thing where you're like, it's constantly moving and changing, and it's like this little amoeba type thing. And you kind of have to tame the beast sometimes, and sometimes the beast is like super quiet and just wants some treats, like this little beast sitting down here. And sometimes the beast is like blowing fire in your face and you're like, now I have no eyebrows. What am I going to do? I have headshots tomorrow. So you kind of have to pay attention to these things. And there's other mindset beliefs that just don't go away by hitting a number. Like I said, self-doubt, imposter syndrome, money mindset, like how you actually feel about money. There's been a bunch of studies that have been done that like money mindset a lot of times comes from like your childhood. It comes from how your family dealt with money. So you kind of have to unpack that, which I have been doing for many years in therapy, as we have talked about. But there's a lot of things where like sometimes the money doesn't make you feel more confident about your writing. It's not as validating as you think. So the mindset piece is like, who are you, right? Like outside of writing, who are you? What are your skills? What are the things that you're good at? What are the things that you're good at in your business? What are the types of things that you can work on to become a better business owner, to become a better whole, like, better person? What are some things that we can kind of work on that you notice coming up? And this is something I do for my mindset, is like I write things down. Like I know like the phrases I repeat to myself often, and then I start working on those. So like one of the things I used to do is I'd be like, I'm a loser, I'm never going to get there. I'm a loser, I'm never going to, and I would have that over and over and over again repeated. And then I was like, oh, wait, why am I saying this to myself? So you have to kind of keep track of these negative thoughts and these bad things that you say about yourself, right? And then start working on them. Because the first thing, right, we all know this, is awareness. You have to become aware of what you're saying, what you're thinking, what you're doing, then you work on it. And remember, your thoughts are just thoughts. Like, they're not sometimes something to just kind of like, you don't have to dig into every thought that you've had. You don't have to accept every thought that you've had. It's just like a bubble. It's just, it's like a cloud. Like, you look outside at all the clouds and you're like, that one looks like a turtle. That one looks like a this. But not every cloud looks like something. Sometimes they look like melted ice cream or something. And, that's kind of it. All right. So those are the first things I wanted to talk about, was kind of mindset stuff. And that's really important. That's something I wanted to roll into with number 2. So let's talk about number 2. Number 2, Charlotte's over here being a derp. Hello, derp. Marie says, or one jigsaw piece at a time, but with moving parts. Yeah, kind of like that. It's like always kind of shifting. Try some lavender oil on her collar. Okay, I will, but she's a little sensitive to lavender oil. Like, she's been kind of sneezy and a little allergic, so I don't know if we'll do that or not, because she's like, that's the other thing, is like, Charlotte has allergies, so, hi, you look so cute. I wish I could pet you more, but you smell from the neck up, or from the chest up. All right, number 2, let's talk about this. So what were some of my takeaways from this discussion, right? These are some of the things that I had taken away from my 6-figure friends. And I've known these people for years, and these were important things that I think are really critical to, like, everybody. We'll get into that in a second. Hold on. I want to answer Shara's question that I see here. Shara says, but how do you go from I'm a loser to positive? So this is a great question. Here's the deal. Actually, we're going to put 1 back up. So I'm going to put 1 back up because this is still mindset, and I think this is important. So Shara, this is what worked for me. And I think this is the piece that a lot of people miss, is there's a lot of talk out there about, they're like, oh, you just switch your mindset to positive. You just like, you don't hate your body. You just love your body. You just keep telling yourself that until you believe it. And that never worked for me. So the deal was that I went from like the worst thoughts about myself, which I'm a loser was not the worst one. It was just one of them, but to a neutral. I was just like, I'm just a person. I'm just a human. And then I was like, I'm a human who's trying my best. I'm a human who's trying, like, I had to go through different phases of like negative, totally neutral, like I'm just a human being. That's a fact. I'm just a human being. And then I would go to like a neutral with like a little positive, like I'm a human being who's trying. Then a little bit more, I'm a human being who's trying my hardest. And then I'd be like, you know what? Eventually after multiple versions of that, I would get to a place where I am now, where I'm like, I feel really good about my work. I don't need you to externally validate me. Yeah, sometimes I'm going to mess up assignments. Yeah, sometimes a client isn't a fit for me. But I'm really trying my hardest to do my best, and I know that my work is good. Like, I've read enough stuff, and I've done enough things to know that my work is good now, and to know that internally. Like, I've talked about this before, but I have this boat analogy, right? Where I'm like, okay, every time I submit an article or a case study or a whatever, content strategy deck, whatever, I have this little paper boat, this little origami paper boat, and I'm standing on the beach. And what ends up happening is I take my little boat, it's like the size of a baseball, and I just put it out into the ocean. And I'm like, all right, buddy, try your best. Good luck. But it's still this delicate paper origami boat out in this vast ocean of uncertainty and possibility, right? So like I had to make all these images to transfer that, to understand that like I don't need someone to tell me, like I don't need my editor to be like, wow, amazing, or like you're the worst. Like that is a separate thing. Like I know that when I submit my work, I tried really hard. I followed the brief or the assignment or whatever as best I could. I was putting in my best work. Sometimes the way I work doesn't make sense, right? Like I find clients who aren't a fit, but you have to get to this place where like you submit it and you feel this, like, I feel this like sense of peace. Like when I submit stuff, I feel this sense of peace. I don't feel like racked with worry anymore about what my client will think. Like, I hope that they think it's great, and I would love to hear that they think it's great. Like, that's a cherry on top, but I already built the rest of the sundae. You have to be happy with that. So the deal is that as you're working on mindset, and this, like, you almost most of the time, what I've noticed in myself and my students is like you can't go, it's not black and white where you're like boom, 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 like negative, positive. You have to start in phases of like training yourself to just be at a neutral. Like, this is something that I do too with like other things, is like use a factually based thing, right? Like, you go from I'm a loser to just I'm a human being. That's it. And then you just keep repeating that. Like, I'm a human being. I'm a human being. And then once you immediately kind of like start thinking that, like instead of thinking I'm a loser, you're just like I'm a human being. Like, your more natural first grab of thought is I'm a human being. That's, for me, that's when I start adding like who's trying my best or who's trying really hard, or and then I start adding things on, and then I get to the positive place. So it's not that you go, I know, Grumpy, I know. It's not that you go from like one to the other immediately. It is a phased process. Go back to your hover hole. It's a phased process. And that's not your hover hole. It's a phased process. Go back to your hover hole. And I think that giving yourself time, you high five? Good job. Other way. Good job. High five. High five. Good job. High five. Other one. Other one. Other one. Good job. High five. Good job. I think giving yourself time to kind of do that and to make space that this is natural. Like, what defeats the process is if you start beating yourself up, right? If you try to say, like, if you go from like I'm a loser to just I'm a human being, and you like keep repeating I'm a loser, and then you're like, oh my God, why are you so dumb? Why did you keep it? Like, you can't beat yourself up in the process. If beating yourself up worked, it would have worked by now, right? Lots of people have said that. So in this process, you have to just keep trying your best to keep going to that neutral thought, and then you can move on. But if you start beating yourself up that it's not perfect, or that you didn't say it right, or whatever, that just totally defeats the thing. We're going from like a really horrible thought to like this thing that you can easily accept. It's easy to accept that you're a human being. Like, that's just what you are, right? You're not like an orca, right? You're not like you're not this tiny dinosaur over here, right? She's like, oh, she said me, I'm gonna get something. You're just a human, right? And then once you kind of get to this like fact-based kind of neutral, then you can start adding nice things for yourself. And I feel like that you're at first, it's kind of uncomfortable because you're like, I'm not used to like nourishing myself. I'm not used to like, giving myself positive thoughts or like trying to help me, like that's kind of a thing about the 6-figure mindset is like, you're nourishing yourself. You're filling your own cup rather than tearing yourself down, and rather than like treating yourself like a trash raccoon hamster. Like, it's just really, you have to give yourself this kind of like kindness, right? The kindness that you would kind of give to everybody else. You have to start giving it to yourself. And once you kind of start nourishing your mindset and nourishing how you think about yourself and how you feel about yourself, right? That kind of all pays dividends in your work and the amount of stuff that you'll accept from clients. And the other thing is that you won't live in this tizzy. I've noticed that this was a thing I used to do, and some of my students do, is like they live in this constant tizzy of like, oh my gosh, there's this and this and this, and then this is happening. Oh my God, da, 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 da. It's like this, they're sitting like with a head covered in honey, and then there's bees on top of it, and then they're trying to talk, right? That's kind of what it's like. You have to kind of like slow for a second and realize that there's nothing that's super immediate. Like that email you got, it only feels like, oh my God, I have to get back to it right now, because of like, that's an internal thing. That's not a reality-based thing. And you can always train your clients that you're like, hey, I'm going to answer in 24 to 48 hours. You can train them to do that. And I think that's the healthy way to do it. But there's like, you have to kind of take it, slow it down. And then it goes back to, right, like all the other mindset things, like you have to fill the pipeline. You got to do the marketing. You got to build yourself up. You got to take care of yourself. You got to get rid of all the stuff, the self-doubt, the self-hate, the imposter syndrome. And there's still stuff. Now, I want to move topics because I want to make sure I mention this in part 2, because this is part of part 2. So part 2 here. So number 2 here is that these my friends and myself, who all make six figures, right? We all still struggle with things. Like we still struggle with imposter syndrome and self-doubt and worrying that we're going to make mistakes, or that like it doesn't really matter how much money you're making, you still have these kind of things that pop up, right? It's kind of like when people say like new levels, new devils, right? So like when you get to this new level, yeah, you might have figured out marketing and you might have figured out your ideal client, but you still have to deal with all of these other things, right? Now maybe you're moving from blog posts to content strategy, and that's a big leap, right? That's a lot of a different ball game. And now instead of having tons of clients, you have a very small subset of clients, because not everybody ends up doing content strategy, right? Or they have an internal person to do it, or they have some other kind of system to do it, right? So there's a lot of things that change. But for me, when I was thinking about takeaways from their discussion, it's like they're all just regular people. Like they're regular people who are trying really hard, who still have stuff that pops up, right? Like they're still dealing with money mindset. They're still dealing with crazy stuff that happens. They're still dealing with all of these other things. Like the money itself, right, hasn't erased anything. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but for me, that was a strong takeaway. Another takeaway I think is important is that they're looking to the future much further ahead. So like a lot of times, like I said, freelance writers don't think far enough ahead. So instead of thinking like 2 weeks ahead or 3 months ahead, like a lot of people are thinking 6 months to a year or maybe more ahead. So for example, they have, like my friends have podcasts. I have this live stream. They have free downloads. They're building email lists. They're building courses. They're doing kind of all of these different things. And in order to have all of those things running, you have to have a much longer schedule. So for example, like my schedule is, I know that I have the course opening in September and April, right? So when Freelance Writer Wealth Lab opens in September and April, I already really pretty much want to have kind of my work situation settled, but I have to be working far enough ahead to have that, all kind of worked out. And most of the time, since I've been running the course, it's worked out. Right now, I'm trying to deal with a bunch of things. So, and we all know that I had the medical emergencies with the dogs and all that stuff. Hi, Bean. But that's the thing is, like, if I'm launching the course, I have to have other things running more smoothly. If I'm doing one-on-one coaching, I have to be strategic about who I take on as a student and when I'm taking them on. Like, it's really hard sometimes to do one-on-one coaching and the course and my freelance writing business and the live stream and all at the same time. So I have to be thinking like, I'm already pre-planning like what master classes I want to run for my students in January, February, and March. And I'm already pre-planning like how I would do things differently for my April course launch, or what kind of new bonuses I might offer. I'm already pre-planning a bunch of strategies that I want to put in place for growing certain things in my business. And I'm also putting a bunch of things in place that like I want to do to change my freelance writing business. All of those things, though, are really important to have. Like, you need to be able to plan further out, like 6 months or a year. You can't be planning in these like super small tidbits of space. That was another thing that I think kind of sets six-figure freelancers apart, is they're looking further out. And because they're looking further out, then they can do more projects. They can try new things. They can expand. They can add a podcast or a live stream or a course or a download or a workshop, right? They have more space to do that because they're planning better. It's not that they necessarily have more time, but it's like that they're better stewards of their time and schedule. Yes? Would you like to make a complaint to the complaint department? You're not even on camera. You're like over in the corner. Go back to your hole. All right, Charlotte, can you catch this? If you feel like this has been helpful so far, good job. Give it a thumbs up. If you feel like you want to learn more about building a six-figure freelance writing business or a high-earning freelance writing business without all the overwhelm and burnout, make sure to subscribe. All right, Charlotte, we're going to do a few more. Good job. Athlete. Good job. Good girl. All right. The other thing that I took away from their discussion was that they all, like pretty much all of us, try to make time for certain specific things that matter to us. So like exercise or mental health or like dealing with that kind of stuff. So like I go to therapy and I was on a really good workout schedule and then things kind of fell apart, which I'm working on it. But one of my friends has like a non-negotiable class. She goes to this fitness class. I forget how many times a week. I think it's twice, but it's like non-negotiable. She goes no matter what. And that's how she kind of keeps her health in check. I have another friend who does dance competitions, and she does like swing dance type stuff. And she makes time for that, even though she has 2 kids and a bunch of things going on. Like, that's really important to her. There's like all of these different things that we do to take care of ourselves. Like, because if we don't, like, if our mental health isn't in check and like all of our priorities to deal with ourselves aren't in check, then everything falls apart. Everything falls apart. So like my students will know, like this week we do Working Wednesday. So within our community, in our Wealth Lab community, we do Working Wednesday where we hop on every Wednesday and we work for a few hours together and we chit chat and like do all our stuff. But this week I canceled. I mean, I canceled it because of the dog emergencies before, but this week I canceled it because I was just really not feeling good. Like, I felt really sick. I needed more time to sleep. I was just really feeling rough. And if I had just gone and done Working Wednesday, that would have been a detriment to everybody. Like, I would have been a crab. It would have been miserable. I would have had a really bad headache all day. It would have been hard for me to do my work. It just would have been miserable for everybody. So instead of doing that, I cancel it, I sleep, and then we get to have this live stream and we get to do more fun stuff. Like, you have to learn how to take care of yourself, and you have to learn that there are certain things that should be priority, your mental and physical health, right? And like the same thing here where I normally walk the dogs a bunch and I can't because it's 1,000 degrees outside every day. And even at nighttime, it's like gets below 100 at like midnight. I know, Minnie, it's been a rough summer. So there's things that you need to prioritize, and you need to understand which things happen at which time. So the other thing to think about here is that even though we have 6-figure businesses, our personal lives sometimes take over. Like, our businesses still don't run on autopilot, even though a lot of people think that by the time you're a 6-figure freelancer, like, you're just getting all these referrals and everything's magic. It's not. Like, I still do a lot of scrappy stuff. And as we've seen, like, I had to deal with personal issues. Like, the last almost 3 weeks now, like, we've been dealing with a bunch of issues with Bo and with Charlotte, and I couldn't do work for a while because, like, we weren't sleeping. Bo was up all the time. Even now, one of the reasons that I had to cancel Working Wednesday was because we have to watch Bo 24/7, and he's not like other old dogs. Like, he's active. He walks around. He wants to go outside. He wants to explore. He wants to jump on stuff. Like, it's a whole thing. So you work for like 45 minutes, and then he's like, I want to go do something now. And then you have to walk away. And then once you get back, you're like, all right, what was I doing? Oh, now. And it's just very exhausting. It's a lot of work. And he has to have medications all the time. Luckily, now we're down to less medications, but it has really been a lot. Like, and we haven't really caught up on sleep. Like, to be honest, I'm still trying to catch up on the 2 weeks of sleep that we kind of lost. And in order to preserve myself so that I can help everybody, right? So I can help people and I can help my students and be there, I have to like take time off. I have to take rest time, and I have to deal with mental and physical health and all that stuff. So for me, one of the takeaways was like, there's things that you just don't compromise on. Like, those things have to be dealt with, or else you're not going to have a 6-figure business. Marie says, one initial challenge with the wealth course was trying to learn too much. Then I settled down the next round and only focused on 2 to 3 lessons and action steps and transformed the money, and I made it in time off. Yeah. So Marie is a good example of this, actually. So one of the things that changed for her with the course was she was working all the time, 7 days a week, no vacation. Now she works a regular schedule. I think it's like less hours. She even works less than 40 hours. I don't remember. But she works way less hours, like a regular schedule, Monday to Friday, has weekends off, takes time off, actually has time to herself. That's a really important piece with getting to 6 figures, is you have to be able to have a schedule like that, right? You have to be able to prioritize those things, and you have to make them an important part of like how you preserve yourself for all of your best stuff for your students or clients or whatever you're working on. All right, one of the other takeaways that I got from their discussion, yes, is to always prioritize your purples. No, here you go. One of the things that I think is a really interesting takeaway from their discussion is that there is a lot more simplicity than you think. Like, a lot of people think there's some, like, I used to think this, and by a lot of people, I guess I mean me, but maybe this, did you catch it? Maybe this resonates with you too. I used to think that there was some kind of like secret set of stuff that 6-figure writers knew, and that they were, okay, Marie says she works 30 hours a week with a few exceptions. So Marie went from working 7 days a week all the time with no vacation or weekends to working 30 hours a week, having vacations and weekends. I'd say that's a pretty big step. And she got her retainer. She got a retainer client, and her income is like the highest ever, right? If I remember. Anyways, there's a lot of these small things and diligence things that you need to do. For example, like following up, paying attention to who are your better clients. There's like little like things that pop up that most people ignore, but I think six-figure writers really pay attention to. And this was a big takeaway for me, is that there is no, like, a lot of times people hit six figures on the most basic of circumstances, right? Like they're just doing the regular stuff. They're being consistent and diligent with their marketing. They're being consistent and diligent with the clients they take, like pay levels and the type of work they do. They're being consistent and diligent with the clients they let go who are no longer a fit for them, whether that's the type of work or the client's attitude or the pay. And they're being consistent and diligent about watching how their business is growing and expanding. It's not anything magical. It's like understanding that it's this cycle, that as you get better at the cycle, your business gets better and you earn more and you get more confidence and you kind of grow. So like, it's, for me, when I started, I had no idea who my ideal client really was. Now I do. Like when I kind of started, I was like, food and travel companies, whatever that means. And now it's like, I know, like there's, for me, like with content, I mean, I know with other stuff, but like specifically what I want to move into is more content strategy, right? So for my content strategy clients, those are Series B startups. They're usually hospitality tech. They're usually prop tech or real estate or some kind of mixture of that. Sometimes it's like SaaS and fintech. Sometimes it's mortgage tech, but it's some kind of combination of that, Series B. And they usually have like 10 to 50 million. They probably have like 25 million-ish in revenue. And I go look at their websites. I know their messaging. I know what their clients need, like, or their audience needs. Like, there's a whole bunch of different things I can tell you about my ideal client now. Those are little things that I picked up along the way after working with dozens of clients. They're things that I started noting to myself. And that diligence pays off in eventually, right, in money. And there's other things like following up. Like I usually don't follow up on LOIs, but I will follow up with someone who I had a call with, or someone who answered my LOI, or someone I sent a proposal to. I will just follow up with them every 3 months until they tell me to stop, or until they leave the company, right? So the deal is that there's all these little things you have to do, right? And then you make more LinkedIn connections, you like and comment on posts, you start making your own posts about like new clients you got, or ideas you have about certain industries or kind of stuff like that. You can make a free download for your ideal clients. You can make an email list. You can make a podcast. Like two of my friends have made actually three of them have made podcasts that are directly for their ideal clients. And then they can get leads from that, right? They can get more content strategy, messaging, positioning, marketing, consultation leads from having that kind of like audience, or having that podcast directly for their ideal audience, right? All of these little things matter. And I think a lot of times freelancers, especially, like I've seen this with, like, this is kind of like why I created the course, is like freelance writers get stuck. They get stuck at like 40 to 60K or 30 to 60K. Like it's this thing that happens, and I've seen it over and over again. Instead of like sloughing off the stuff that doesn't work, they're just like, oh, well, they're giving me money. Like they don't do any analysis. They're not like looking at their patterns and seeing like, maybe I can ditch one client here and get a new one client here. Like there's just like this, constant feeder tube. So they're like, cool, let's do the feeder tube. And then like 10 years go by and they're like, why am I stuck at 40K? This is a thing that happens a lot with like just being smart about your business. And it's not about getting rid of all your clients and starting over, which I have done, which I've had to do. But it is about like understanding that there's this like trickle in, trickle out effect. And then the trickle in, trickle out can be your clients, like what you work on, right? Like the trickle in, trickle out for me was like trickle in more content strategy, trickle out more blog posts. I still do blog posts and articles, but I've changed the kind that I do. I do more reported articles and more research-based articles, and those are paying better, right? Rather than regular blog posts. And I'm trickling in more content strategy. And then you trickle out lower paying clients that you don't want to work with, or clients that just aren't a fit for where your business is anymore, or a niche you don't want to work in anymore. And you trickle in stuff that you want. But you have to pay attention to the patterns and the strategies that you're using, right? That's really important. There's this thing that I noticed among all of us is that we're all like paying attention to these little things, like the things that most people miss or the things that people ignore. We were paying attention to those little things like, oh, I noticed that when a client said A, I thought or felt B, and I realized that wasn't my client anymore. So every time a client said A, I would ask them B follow-up question to make sure that we were on the same page. Or there would be a bunch of different things. I know, I hear you. There'd be a bunch of different things that just kind of like pop up over the course of us working with clients. Like we realized pretty much not at the same time, but pretty close, like within a couple of years of each other, that we're like, oh, we want to do more case studies. We want to do more, like, what's this messaging and positioning thing? What's this content strategy thing? And then we realized like, oh, that's what we should be doing. Like, you know, we don't want to do any more blog posts. Like we want to do more of this stuff that like is, oops, hold on. We almost canceled. Help. Okay, there we go. Whew, that was close. So we realized that there's a lot better ways to leverage, you know, niche knowledge, talent, and skills and expertise, right? And we were like, we should do that. But you have to kind of get to that place of realization. You kind of have to be plugged in. You can't just like put your business on autopilot and be like, everything's great. Like at some point, I guess you could, where maybe you're like so stuffed with leads that you like farm them out to everybody you know. But I mean, like good quality leads, not people that are like, I'll give you $100 to write one blog post. Which, you know, there's a client for everybody. That's just not my client. And I don't think most six-figure freelancers are doing that. Okay, last thing I want to say on this piece here. Marie says, yes, retainer and high earnings. So yes, retainer, and this is her highest earning year yet. And that she can feel not as good when I go, yeah, so you can feel better about the grocery store. And Marie says she turned down more work in the last year than she did in the previous year. Yes, and made more and had time off. Yes, this is important. Six-figure freelance writers have the mindset that they usually say no. I say no to almost like a lot of things that come in. I say yes to a very specific subset of things. And that's another really important thing. Is like you have to know what is your definite yes and what's your definite no. It doesn't have to be so black and white. Sometimes there's like a maybe, right? But most of the time I say no to a lot of things and yes to a very select few. So that's important too. Vicky says, maybe people stuck in the middle income are just not admitting that they're kind of happy at middle income and don't really care for getting six figures. That could be true. There's like, that's one of the things that I talk about in the course is like, it's not always about getting to six figures. Like that was a big thing for me. That was a really important milestone for me personally. But I know a lot of people that are like, I would like to make 40K or 30K or 50K as supplemental extra income for my family. Like it's something that I would just want to do. Or even if we had an extra 10 or 20K, that would be great, right? It's not always about getting to six figures. But if you're coming to me saying you want to make six figures and you've been fuddy-duddying around in, in like this pool, a cesspool, then that's a problem. But yeah, like there's a lot of times where that's something that we go over in the course is like, it's about building a business that you love that works for you. It's not always about six figures or high earning or all this stuff. Like, yes, high earning is important, but high earning means different things, right? High earning could be like, wow, we made an extra 30K this year. Like that was really important for our family. Or high earning could mean I finally hit six figures. Like it kind of depends, right? This live stream specifically is about like six figures, obviously, but it does depend. Marie says a potential client said, I'll give you lots of work, but you have to give me a discount. I explained that I wouldn't do it, that it wouldn't be what I made. Okay. But the $10,000 I'd leave on the table, and I learned floor prices. Yeah. So you have to know floor prices. That's the other thing. All right. So let's talk about number 3 before I get too carried away. All right, last thing we're talking about is number 3 here. So if you feel like this has been helpful, give it a thumbs up. If you feel like you want to learn more about becoming a high-earning six-figure freelance writer, or you just want to build a freelance writing business you love, subscribe. All right, the third thing, number 3, is like, how do we train ourselves to think more like a writer who's operating at six figures, whether you want to make $10,000 or $200,000. There's some mindset things and some things that we can talk about in common. So as we're kind of going through these things, right, we're thinking ahead, right? We're thinking ahead. I know, woo, it's hard to be in here sometimes. We're thinking ahead. We're making sure that we're paying attention to our marketing. We're following the little things, right, that people kind of forget. The little things and being consistent and kind of moving forward, that's what really matters. That really matters to like making a better business. The other thing that I think is important when you're kind of training yourself is, like I said, write those negative thoughts down and start working on being aware of when you say them and correcting them. The other thing is that you have to know your yeses and nos, right? You have to know what's a yes for you, what's a no, and what's kind of like, tell me more, maybe, like, let's kind of figure this out. The other thing is that as we're kind of training ourselves to be a six-figure writer, it's about working on quality of work, right? So as you kind of go along, no matter what income you make, you should be working on quality of work. And I think the important thing here is I read this quote the other day that's basically like, did you find an extra treat in there? Oh my gosh. That good writers read more than they write. And I thought about that for a long time, like that the best writers have read vastly more than they've ever written. And I thought about that for a long time, like days. Like I read this several days ago. I've been thinking about it, and I realized that's totally true. And I was like, how is that possible? But then you think about your process, right? So here's one of my processes. I'm going to give you actually a couple. So the first one is magazines. So let's say I'm going to go write for a new magazine that I've never written before. I'll probably read somewhere between 20 and 30 stories to write one story. So in order to get an example of voice, tone, style, to get an example of like who are their best writers, who do I align with, I go read examples where they're, I always ask my clients for like content examples. They're like, here's some. I go read those, but I read like 20 or 30 magazine articles before I write anything. So before I ever type, I've already read 20 to 30 times more than what I'm creating, not including the research I actually have to do for that article or the interviews or anything else. This is just purely information to write like that publication. So then I was like, I do that. And then the second one is like when I go do content strategy, I ask them for all of their assets. I ask them for all their sales and marketing material. I ask them for all of their like content that they've created so far. Anything they can give me that helps with sales and marketing and audience and content, I ask for it. So before I start any content strategy project, I'm reading into all of the stuff they've ever created to help them make money or to help them create content before I do anything. And that's all reading based before we actually start writing and creating. And the third one is the same thing for like if I'm going to do a case study, right? If I go to a case study, I am having a call with with my client, and they're saying like, hey, this is what we want the case study to be about. Let's talk about this thing. Or there's some kind of document that I have to read, right, to tell me some information. Then I actually go research that company, right? Like let's say I'm doing a case study. I go research the case study company. What's going on there? How are things going? Let's go check their social media. Then I go research like my client in case there's like some weird thing I missed or some part of their process that we're trying to highlight, right? Like let's say there's some part of their POS or ordering system or prop tech software or database that's really important that we highlight. I need to learn more about it. Then I have the interview, then I do more research, then I make the case study. So before I actually do anything, I'm doing all these steps. And I think that's kind of the key is that six-figure writers or high-earning writers or people who are making their work better quality, they're digging in almost every time. They're not entering a blog post or an article saying, oh, I've already done it 20 times, I can write it in an hour, which it can happen, that totally happens. But I feel like the smart writers are like still doing the research. Like I'll still go read some example pieces, like even if I've been writing for a publication or a client for a while, sometimes, the work gets spread out, right? The work gets spread out by a few months and you're like, what were we saying again? So you go read another 5-10 articles, or you're writing some new type of article where they're like, hey, we're trying to do features. Like, can you go figure this out? And then you have to go figure it out. But you're always reading and synthesizing and analyzing before you write anything. And I think that's a really important piece to know. And your writing gets better the more you do that. The more widely you read, and that means topics, authors, writers, publications, thought leaders, companies, the wider you read, the better off you are. I read a lot, like a lot. And I read books, but Most of the time it's like I'm reading articles or I'm reading newsletters or I'm reading stuff for clients. But that stuff is all informative and really helpful. So you got to do that. That's really important. Oh, we already did that comment. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about for training, training yourself, right, for becoming more like a six-figure writer. And then we're going to get to the question because I have a lot to say about this, but I don't want to make this too lengthy. Okay. So the last thing that I want to say about training yourself at the six-figure level is that it takes time. It's not overnight, and you don't have to beat yourself up about this. So for me, I just kept asking myself, like, when am I going to get there? When am I going to get there? When is it going to get figured out? And that was the wrong question. It was just very defeating, and it made me feel so behind, and like everybody else was doing it right and I was doing it wrong because I couldn't hit this weird milestone. And that's just not the case. Like, building a six-figure business is not an overnight thing. And here's the secret, right? Is that no matter how long it takes you to get to whatever milestone you want, whether that's six figures or otherwise, everybody's on their own path. So even if your friend made six figures 2 years into being a freelance writer, there will always be a time where they have to regroup and figure out their business. There isn't some like magic time where like they just make six figures forever with no struggle. Everybody struggles. It's just at different times. So for example, like I've noticed this among my friends, like the times when I'm feeling really good, sometimes my friends are really struggling in their business. And the times where I'm really growing or the times where I'm really sinking, they're growing or sinking, right? Like they're kind of offset. But everybody's on their own path and timeline. So the fact that someone made a certain amount of money doesn't change the fact that they still struggle. They have different struggles, and those struggles happen at different times. So for example, I've talked to writers who are like, oh yeah, like I've had my freelance business for 15 years and I went off referrals and now I'm not getting referrals. So like, what do? I don't actually know how to do anything other than get referrals. Like I don't know how to do marketing. I don't know, like I don't have a website or LinkedIn, like help, I'm not making any money anymore. That's kind of like part of it, right? Like even though their business was running off referrals, like everybody goes through a struggle at some point. It all just kind of depends. I've done a lot of struggling in the early years, and I'm still struggling. There's still things I struggle with now. But it's more about understanding that you're on your own path and you're figuring out your own puzzle. You're not comparing and despairing, and you're not worrying about like everybody else who's getting there faster. It takes time to build like a freelance writing business. And I always kind of think of it as like a pyramid, like you're building the pyramids, right? Strong foundations are the ones that don't crumble during tough times. This is something that I think is why freelance writers, many of them have made it through tough times, is because they spent the time doing the fundamentals and the basics so that when things get hard and they have to be scrappy, it doesn't take them any time. But the people who depended on other things and didn't build the important like website, LinkedIn, or things that help them get inbound leads, then they really struggle and it becomes a huge disaster when tough times come because they have no systems and processes in place, right? So for me, those basics are really important. Hold on a second. Those basics are really important to building a business that lasts. When you have a strong foundation, it's really hard to shake it. But if you're kind of rushing around and then only focusing on money and like only doing all these things to make money, then what happens when things get hard is like you want to give up immediately because it's not easy anymore, or because you didn't learn all the skills. Like this is kind of my thing about platforms, is like when people get on platforms, they have no skills. Like they don't actually know how to run their business. And if that platform goes under, which they have many times, these writing platforms just like disappear overnight. People don't know how to run a business. Now they have no money. They have no money and everything's been shut off, right? So learn the fundamentals and the basics and then scale from there, and understand that good things take time. Like it takes time to build a strong foundation. Okay, last thing we're going to talk about is question. We have a question that came in, so let's get to the question. Question. You said on last week's live stream that looking at a client's website, you can spot some inconsistencies, which are red flags for you. Can you give me an example? Yes, I can. So last week we were talking about, can you identify a bad client before you send an LOI or pitch? And that the bad client is like, sometimes they're just not a fit for you, and it's not always a bad client thing, right? So here's the deal. When I go to someone's website, right, Vicky says, And if the platform that goes under had never paid enough, then you have no, yeah, right, exactly. If the platform goes under and, sorry, and yeah, you have no money, then you're in big trouble. So yeah, if I look at a client's website, the inconsistencies are like their messaging is off. Like every different page you read on that website is different. Like the home page is different from the about page, which is different from the services page, which is different from the blog. They all have different tones and styles. They all have weird things going on. This isn't necessarily always a red flag, but it's something to watch for. The other thing is that they're not updating their blog content regularly, or their blog content is really short, or it's not relevant to their audience. That's something to pay attention to. The inconsistencies too with like client stuff is that there's a big difference between their LinkedIn and their website. It's not always the case. That's the thing, is like I'm cautious to say like it's always a red flag. Like I said in that video, which I'll link to below, you have to have a conversation with someone, because a lot of times people will be like, yeah, our stuff sucks, please help us. So these are kind of things to just kind of look out for. The inconsistencies too are that their website may not have a ton of content, and they like are publishing things that their audience doesn't care about. Like they're publishing white papers, but their audience cares about case studies, or they're publishing really long ebooks, and their audience is consumers who want like quick hits guides, that kind of stuff. The other inconsistencies are that like people leave the company pretty frequently, so there's like an inconsistency in like who's working there. The other things are like, if I'm looking at their website, like their images and their branding and all that stuff doesn't seem to match up. Like it's all kind of mishmashed. You can kind of just see that they don't have it together. Like you'll know, like when you go to a website and you see that things are discombobulated and they don't make sense, that's something to watch for. It's not necessarily always a red flag. It's just something to like have on your radar. Pay attention to like if they have like a bot chat. Like sometimes they have like a little messenger that's like a little robot that's like, hi, how can I help you? Like see what messages come up in there. Check to make sure like their information is like making sense. There's a lot of times where you go to their website and their website is old and dated, and it looks like they updated one page here and one page there, and it doesn't make any sense. And there's a lot to be said about a company who cares about their web presence. Like even if their web presence isn't great, at least if they have some kind of modern template and their website doesn't look like, the Space Jam website from 93 or 96 or whatever. Like that's a thing for me that I look at. Like there's a lot of times where I've looked at websites that are just super old and dated, and they have this way old dated attitude towards content and towards the internet and like that kind of stuff. So I'm looking for like modern, updated, mostly cohesive. The brand images and the branding make sense. There's connection between social media and LinkedIn and their website. Like all of those things kind of go together. And then I'm looking for like, do they have a blog, or are they creating content? Like, is there some way that I can see what they're creating and what they're doing? Is there some kind of thing where I can scan through or download something to get a feel for like what they're giving subscribers, that kind of stuff. That's all really important. But like I said, I think the disclaimer here is always that you need to talk to someone, because a lot of times, we're creating content for people because they're not good at it. They need help, or it's not resonating with their audience, or they don't fully understand what their audience really needs in terms of content. So that stuff's all really important. But yeah, those are all the things we should kind of look for, both good and bad, in those websites. All right. I hope this has been helpful. Charlotte, can you go back to your hobble hole so we can put you back in your hobble hole? Go back to your hobble hole. You've gotten like 50,000 treats here. Okay, ready? Good job. You're so athletic. I can't believe you can see that tiny, tiny little treat and you can just catch it. All right, we'll do some high fives, and then we're going to hop off. If you ever have a question or something like the question that I just answered, you can always go to mandyellis.com/question and put a question or topic in there, and I'll answer it on the live stream. High five. High five. Good job. High five. High five. Good job. You're the best. I would pet you more, but you still smell like skunk. Yeah, you can always go to mandyellis.com/question. Pop it in there. We're here every Friday at noon Central Time. I hope this was helpful. Just kind of remember that it takes time, and that hitting six figures isn't always everybody's goal. you know, it can be your goal. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you just want to build a better business, these mindset things and these tips and tactics will be really helpful. It's about building that strong foundation and just like getting to the next step and thinking further ahead. Yeah. So Vicky says this stuff is useful for to people whose immediate next step isn't quite 6 figures yet. Yeah, I think that's great too. Like it's supposed to be this kind of stepping stone, or like something where you can use it to kind of like move forward. Yeah, Charlotte is a good girl. You're a good girl. You're doing great today. I like your funny ears. You look like you're gonna take off. You look like a bat. Good job. Did you get it? All right. All right. I think we're going to hop off. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. Thanks, everybody, for the good questions and the good comments. I hope that this was super helpful. And one last thing. We are like just about 30 days-ish from the course opening. So if you want to hear more about the course, about Freelance Writer Wealth Lab, we're like just about 30 days. Like it'll open up for enrollment at the beginning of September, and then it won't reopen until April. So every year the course opens in September and April. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to mandyellis.com/course and sign up for the wait list. And I would love to have you as a student. I have many of my students here today, but I think that the thing to keep in mind about the course is like, it's kind of like this. It helps you get to the next step, whether you want like to build a business that you just love to do your writing, or whether you want to be like 6 figures and scale your business. I give you all the tips and tricks in there. So, all right, everybody, I hope everybody has a good Friday, and I will see you next Friday. Bye.